We ask that everyone place themselves on mute unless you are speaking. I'm Stephanie Anderson, the Probation Foster Care Specialist at CPOC. Thank you for joining us today in the session titled Utilizing Child-Specific Funds to Maximize the Opportunity for Success for Youth in Foster Care with Complex Needs. We are very excited to have this session today that we hope will be helpful to assist in supporting youth with complex needs. Not only will this webinar cover details about complex care child-specific funding, there will be examples of ways to utilize these dollars. This workshop will also include a walkthrough on how easy it is to complete the child-specific request form, followed with Q&A to help you with your cases. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce you to our speakers for today. From DSS, we have Ty Morgan. She's the manager over at the Foster Care Policy Rates Unit. From San Bernardino County Probation Department, we have Division Directors Kyle Borg, Eric Rayleigh. I will go ahead and pass this over to our first speaker, Ty Morgan. Please take it away.
Okay, let me share my screen. Is that the right screen?
Yep, that's it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so as Stephanie said, I'm Ty Morgan. I'm the manager of the Rights Policy Unit within the System of Care branch of CDSS. Now I just have to figure out how to move the slides. Oh, there we go. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Assembly Bill 153, which was the child-specific funding bill. And it allocated $18.1 million annually, and that was announced in ACL 21-119. And the funding is for children in foster care with complex needs. I wish that I had a definition for you of complex needs, but I don't. It's one of those things, you know it when you see it. A good indicator is if they're involved with two different services, like they have mental health services and foster care, etc. And then the funds that we did allocate in 21, 22, 22, 23, and the beginning of 23, 24 were allocated based on the number of STRTP placements in your county. We are hoping to do something a little different in the second half of 23, 24 in order to get the funds utilized. We have not spent them. And so we are trying to think of creative ways to get that done. When you're submitting a request, all requests have to have a recommendation basis. There's a list here. It's qualified individual, technical assistance with our department. Those TA calls happen all the time. John of my staff is here and he sits in on those. A clinical determination of an IPC, regional center assessments, CFT assessments, educational assessments, psychological, psychiatric assessments, and medical assessments. So once you have your assessment, you need to develop a plan to address the needs that were identified in that assessment. And if this is a tribal youth, you need to engage your tribe in the development of whatever plan you come up with. Once you have your plan, you're going to complete the child-specific funding request template. We did a new and improved one earlier this year that is in ACIN I0323. I think Kyle is going to go through that for you later. Once you've completed it and had it signed by a program manager or above, send it to the rates policy mailbox. And we do try very hard to get these turned around in, excuse me, 2 days. The biggest delays are generally when the counties don't get back to us, to be honest. So make sure that you, get everything in there and get it to us. Then we will look at the requests and approve them. And once they are approved, then you can spend the money. And once you've spent the money, you can submit an invoice to us to get paid. This is really important. We have a county who shall remain nameless that keeps trying to amend their invoices, and we have absolutely no way to do that. They go from us to accounting to the state controller's office, and then the state controller's office cuts you a check. So there is no amendment process in there. So please make sure you send them after you've expended the funds. And semi-recently on our approval forms, we have started including a reference number. So if you can include that on your invoice, it will help them get processed faster and get paid faster. So a couple things to note. I'm going to jump to the last bullet. You can't use this funding to supplant existing funding. So if the placement could be paid by AFDCFC, you're not going to have these funds. If you want to pay for a child's medications, but Medi-Cal pay for it, then we can't approve these funds. And so going along with that, we cannot pay county staff. County staff are already reimbursed through the time study process and get 40 admin. So we've had a couple of requests for that we had to deny. We will not pay the costs of shelter care. We might pay if you're providing services to the child while they're in shelter care in order to get them out of the shelter, but the actual placement costs we would not cover. And unfortunately, our legal department has made the determination that we cannot pay for youth placed at home, like in a trial unification or in a guardian's home. So some things to keep in mind, these funds do not roll over. So if you got 50,000 this year and you say, oh boy, next year I'll have, I'll get another 50,000 and that'll be 100,000. That's not how it works. If we don't expend them, they're going to go back to the general fund and they're going to be used for DMV or something. So you do have 18 months to put in a claim after the end of the fiscal year, but the actual expenditure does have to happen in the relevant fiscal year. So for an example, if the county placed a child in an STRTP of 1 in February of 2022, they can still submit a claim for those funds up to December 31st of 2023. Now that does mean that we are about to get rid, we're about to lose those 21-22 funds come December. So the department is looking at maybe reallocating those to somebody that will spend them. So if you do have something in mind that you paid for in 21-22 and you want to get paid back for it, please submit your request as soon as you can. And then lastly, we just have all of our posted guidance on this subject. ACL 21-119 just announced the program and put out the guidelines. CFL 21-22-35 did the first allocation for 21-22. 22-2308 was the allocation for 22-23. ACIN IO323 again was the new and improved request form. And lastly, just recently, the CFL 23-2406 did the allocation for this year. So I don't know, Stephanie, are you doing questions now or at the end or?
We can actually open it up for questions.
Mackenzie, can you end me again? I don't know how to do it. Thank you. Okay, so if there are any questions, I'm here and my staff, John Hale, who you may have talked to, is also here.
And just one thing to share is there's going to be Q&A between this presentation. So if you happen to have something that cross your mind later on, that's fine. There will be several segments that includes Q&A. But if you do have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or you can actually speak. I don't think there's a lot of people speaking right now, so. All right, Ty, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and continue on. And Eric and Kyle. Oh, yes, we will be sending out a PowerPoint and the materials post this.
All right. So the role of Kyle and I are over placement in San Bernardino County probation. And what we have done is we found out about the funding as well and wanted to make sure that we utilized it for youth with complex needs. And we had a great deal of success in that area. And that's how we came to be part of the initial presentation in Sacramento. And then of course, CPOC reached out to us to do this as be part of this webinar as well. So Kyle, if you want to start off with the first slide there.
There we go. Can you guys see it? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Hi, so good afternoon. My name is Kyle Borg. I'm a division director for San Bernardino County. My boss is Eric Rayleigh. He's not just keeping tabs on me. He's gonna give a bunch of wealth of information. When we first started sitting down to try to figure out how we could relay what we've done, it was really good because I was in the role of the supervisor of placement. So I had some of the line staff, direct connection with difficult cases. And Mr. Rayleigh, being division director too, he had the more of the overview managerial aspect of it. So we actually have two different views because I know we have the audience of probably 4 different types of personnel here. So thank you guys for coming and joining us. We wanted to start with the ACL that was mentioned. So ACL 21-119. I know everyone can read, but I like to just start with this because it's important. It was designed, created to support new and expanded programs, services and practices and training that could build system capacity and ensure the provision of a high quality continuum of care designed to support foster children in the least restrictive setting, consistent with the child's permanency plan. And I wanted to really hit on that, the least restrictive setting. There's a reason that we really want to have these kids supervised in the least restrictive setting. And I'll get to that in about 2 slides. So just that's a little nugget for you. So overview, what we're going to talk about. We're going to give a situation.
Did you get this email?
Oh, I'm sorry, I think someone's
Oh,
not muted.
let me forward it to you.
That's okay.
Everyone can mute their lines. Thank you.
I don't think I have the control to mute from here, but I would do it in a heartbeat. So I wanted to talk about the situation. So we're going to give a general situation, 1,000-foot level, what's kind of the systemic issues that we're kind of faced with. And then also a very specific situation that we encountered. We're going to talk about the solution that we had and how we tailored that for one youth, specific to them. Our process. One of the things that I really appreciate when I go to a training or something like this is having actionable processes, not just, hey, we're going to collaborate and we're going to communicate and it's going to be actually something that you can be tangible and descriptive. And then our outcome is going to be design and measurable. So that's a little sneak peek. So our situation, we talk about complex needs, children, complex care needs. What that really means is they have a lot of challenges, right? So they're high acuity needs. We talk about fire setting, we talk about assault on staff, we talk about individuals who have sexual perpetrated. We have all these kind of kids, and it's a challenge to place them. So it's a challenge to place a fire setter. It's a challenge to place someone who's assaulted staff. Chronic AWOLs, those are challenging. But as you get more needs, then that scales up together. So, I mean, it's like high school algebra, y plus 1 equals x plus 1. The more challenges you have, it's also going to keep going up and up to place that youth. And I think we could all understand that because we've seen it time and time again. What are we going to do with this kid? They have some serious needs. So what do? They stay in the juvenile hall, and that's up on the top right-hand side of the screen. So what does this do? Well, it creates a strain on our juvenile hall because we can't get this kid out to where they need to be in an STRTP to get their treatment. So logistically, this becomes a strain on our juvenile hall. Financially, it becomes a strain on our juvenile hall, but really, I think it's more for staff who are at the juvenile hall. If they're dealing with this youth, say assault on staff or argumentative behaviors, if the longer that they stay in there, they don't get better without treatment. And that's why we're trying to get them out as fast as we can, because I'll speak for our county. The juvenile hall in San Bernardino County isn't a therapeutic environment. it's not designed to be a therapy environment. It's designed to be a safe environment. So if we're expecting our youth to get magically better while they sit at the juvenile hall, we can treat some issues, but what we really need is to get them to the right place with the right treatment in a therapeutic environment, so that we can have less of that strain on our juvenile hall, less of the strain on our staff, and some of the finances. So that's down here to the bottom left. So that's the benefit. The benefit is we get these kids out, we get them to the place where they need to be, and we can have a better outcome. And one of the things that I have been experiencing a lot, and me and really talk about this all the time, is what's the actual need? So what's with this specific kid or that specific kid, what's the actual need that's going to make this one not have criminal behavior in the future? As a taxpayer, that's what I strive for. Okay, not just, is there a place that will take this little Joey? Is there a place that's going to take him? Is there STRTP that will actually just have him show up and he can sleep in their bed? Okay, there is, but what's the actual behaviors and therapy that's going to get them from criminal behavior to non-criminal behavior? And that's the tough conversation we have to have when you sit down with your staff and your administration to try to justify some of the stuff we're talking about today. So I'm going to get to our specific example. So we have a youth who was named Joey. He was a 17-year-old male, and he was a CFS youth for a long time. He was a long-time CFS youth. Family was not present in his life. No brothers or sisters, no family. He had some mental health concerns. He AWOL'd a lot from CFS, from his different placements. And we'll get to his criminality. On one of these AWOLs, he had been speaking with a homeless man, trying to use a cell phone. Something happened. He wouldn't exactly say what happened. I don't know if he was assaulted or if he tried to take advantage of him. Whatever happened, Joey left and then came back later and took a brick to the homeless guy while he was asleep. So that turns into violent 602, attempt murder, pled down to assault, deadly weapon. He was with San Bernardino County Probation, and then he went to be successful. So he was successful in an STRTP. He graduated from the program. He had his challenges, but he got through the entire STRTP. But you know, and we had to work with him in therapy. But yeah, he got through it. So after that, he graduated, and he didn't have a family to go back to. He didn't have an RFA to go back to, so he went back to the CFS system as a WIC 300, and he was there about 6 months in a STRTP with CFS, and then he got some new charges. So he came back to us again. We are a single status county in San Bernardino. There are pros and cons, but the fact of the matter was, for us at this point in time, he was back with our county, with our department, the probation department. And so now we go back to all the programs that we use typically. We go to our entire list of our regular clients, and they all deny him. Every single person denies for one reason or the other. Mostly the violence, also property destruction, some mental health concerns. So those are all the negatives. And during this process, we identified at the very bottom, he de-escalates well with time and space. So that was the one thing we're like, okay, maybe we can do something with that. So what was our solution? Well, we went to some type of training, and we heard this thing called child-specific funding. So we said, well, what about this? What can we, maybe this could be our solution with Mr. Joey. So what we did is we started talking to our STRTPs. I went back to the program that he had been successful at last, and we started to have a conversation with them, because what I believe is when you have those relationships, you actually accomplish much more than just a contract. So we we worked with our relationships that we have, and we said, hey, would you be willing to take Joey in, and what would it take? Not is it accepted or denied? I already have that. I got the packet right here. It's denied. Okay, it's denied. What would it take for this to be accepted? And then that was the start of the conversation of, well, we'd need some things from you guys, some assurances, and we'd need some assurances from him. Okay, let's have that conversation. So we one of the things that they wanted was a behavior contract at the onset, so they wouldn't have to jump through hoops to get a 14-day notice. And really that was for Joey to understand, hey, day one, you had issues here before. After probation wasn't involved anymore, you had issues here before, and we know those issues. It's not an unknown. So we're gonna have a contract with you, and we need you to abide by these things. So we said, sure, that sounds great. What else are we talking about? Enhanced involvement from the PO. That sounds great. We can do that. Enhanced communication with the CFTMs, telephone calls more frequently than we would typically do for other STRTP kids. What we asked of them was, hey, can you provide a space for his de-escalation? I said, yeah, we can provide a space for his de-escalation. And then what we negotiated was that would probably be at a double STRTP rate for the program to provide this space. So I'm not asking for extra staff, but as long as he has a space for de-escalation, which is what has worked in the past, we could work out a double STRTP rate, and we had a little written agreement. And then the last agreement between us and our relationship was a quick turnaround. So if we got a 14-day notice, we're not going to wait till day 13. We'll be there within 48 hours, and that's just because there's something called a weekend, and I can't always pull my POs off of that. So yeah, so that was what we talked about. Yeah, Mr. Ely, go ahead.
So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context on this. So and I saw this in the questions, I think it was from Karen Muller about examples. So every youth, we believe there's some way existing or potentially could exist in California for them to get better, for them to get the treatment that they need. You have to start from that perspective. Okay, but it'll be different in many cases. How do we figure out what it is? And then how do we create that if it doesn't already exist? I think some of the conversations that I had with Kyle were mainly about, well, we don't have this kind of place for this kind of youth. Okay, well, how do we create that? And that led into some of the conversations. I saw in the chat when Ty mentioned, for example, equine therapy. We haven't tried that, but if that's what would result in it working, then that's the thing that we want to do, right? I think that for those of us who have been around for over 25 years, like myself, we've seen many times when, what's the phrase? We fit a square peg in a round hole, because the round holes are all that we have. So we try to force them into the situations that we have available, rather than starting from the perspective of what does the youth need to be successful? Okay, is that already somewhere? If not, how do we create it? In this case, they wanted double the STRTP rate. Well, that's pretty straightforward, and some other things as well. That's pretty straightforward. We have this money, we can do that. Let's say, as another county had mentioned, what if it costs triple the STRTP rate or quadruple? Well, if that's what's necessary, then it's still the least expensive thing that's going to work. So in our experience, we've seen numerous attempts to make something that we didn't think was going to work, and we tried to force it. And when we spent a bunch of money on it and then it didn't work, well, then we were just back at square one anyway. So why not spend the extra money from the beginning to create the thing or find the thing that is going to work in that individual's case? Does that sound about right, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for me, it was a learning experience of kind of that, let's think outside the box. And here I am at my desk, like, this is what we've always done. These are our programs. They're denied. They're denied from the programs. I have the list. I have the paper. They're denied. Okay, that's not the end. That's not the end. That's just the starting point until you have a conversation based on your relationship with the people at that program. So I would highly emphasize, if you're the one in your department who has burned a couple bridges with that STRTP that you're thinking of, maybe have someone else be the contact. Just a thought, but so that's our solution. But this is still very amorphous. This isn't exact. So what did we do? What's our process? So first, what we did after we kind of had this idea in our heads of what we could do, a possible solution, we emailed ratespolicy@dss.ca.gov, and Joel Hale, who is on this call, he actually responded very quickly, much faster than many other government agencies would have responded. And that began a relationship with him. And we asked questions and more questions. And we said, well, maybe we could use the money for this, or we could use the money for that. So we found that one of the things, like was said earlier, there is documentation that's needed when you're going to do one of these complex care referrals. And so what we did is we kind of doubled down. One of them is the QI has to agree. They have to support what you're doing. So if you have a QI support for your complex care idea that you're getting funded, then that is one of the stamps that will approve it. Another one is if the IPC supports it. So we doubled down because I didn't want to walk up to my chief and say, hey, I had an idea, but it got denied, and now we owe them, $16,000 a month. I wanted to make sure that we had all the money or all the support we needed to get it approved. So that's what we did. We had the QI assessor attend to CFTM, and we talked to the QI and said, hey, this is our plan. This is what we think we're going to do. What do you think? And she had done the initial QI for Joey and said, that's a great idea. I think that's a wonderful idea. I support it. And then the IPC, we talked to them and they also agreed. They supported it. So once we did that, we completed the application, which I'm going to show you at the end of this presentation. It's not long, it's not exhaustive. We completed the application. Your chief will have to sign, and then you email that scanned copy to ratespolicy@dss.ca.gov. So one of the things that I thought going into this process was, this isn't really going to work, maybe, right? Like, I don't know. Is this really going to work? Or is it going to qualify? What's the likelihood that this actually goes through? And that's just because sometimes I'm pessimistic. I'm a realist. I'll say I'm a realist. Sometimes I'm a realist. Number two, I thought, hey, this is going to be a difficult process. And I thought personally, this is going to be time consuming because I've dealt with other things here at probation, and it doesn't always happen quickly. I can tell you from my point of view, all three of those are not true. Not a difficult process. I will show you at the end of this, and it was not time consuming. And here's my proof. So we were approved for $45,843. We were nearing the end of fiscal year 22-23. It couldn't extend past it, and then we'd have to resubmit for that for the next year. So that was the amount we were approved for in the period of time. So we sent our signed application with the chief and the documentation attached on 4/12/23, received approval 4/19/2023. I cannot promise that will happen for everyone, but that is my experience of how fast it turned around, which working in government, that is almost unheard of, especially if you're dealing with contracts or board or supervisors or any other area with fiscal information. That was like lightning speed for my point of view. I'm going to take this time right now to walk you through completing the actual request form. This is all there is. It's only these, it's only these three. It's these three on the right-hand side. On the left, this is what an example, and please, this is only example. It says right at the top, this is not for legal use. Speak with your county council. if you're gonna make some type of agreement like this, this is something that looks similar to what we used when we were having conversations with our STFTP. So our purpose, Joey Kanga, put his date of birth in there. He was ordered a foster care placement. Due to his high acute needs, he'd been denied from numerous programs, and we were trying to expedite his release from juvenile hall to begin his treatment plan. Just like I talked, I'm like a broken record. That's the reason that we're trying to get this kid out is so we can start the treatment with him. We entered a discussion with the last STRTP, and I called it Australia's best placement here, and asked how we could meet Joey's needs together, collaboratively, right? So this is what we came up with. Open lines of communication. Probation agrees to conduct monthly in-person visits, initial weekly virtual visits. One of these will be attended by this placement supervisor. Australia's best placement agrees the contract probation with behavioral issues or issues that need to be addressed and contact the placement supervisor by phone or email if there's no timely response. Simple. Hey, if you guys can't get a hold of somebody, call me and I'll respond. Proper case management. Both will work together to convey consistent messages. Items that cannot be followed through will not be promised to Joey. So this is one of the examples of, for this specific youth, that's why item number 2 is there. They had identified that when he was with CFS, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, but this is just the reality of this kid. Things were promised to him. Hey, if you do X, then I will take you to ice cream, or however small it was. They promised things to Joey and didn't follow through with it. And at that, he would explode because he was let down, like he was always let down, and it would turn into a very, very big issue. Whereas for most people, it wouldn't. But for him, that was one of his hot button items. So they asked, we put something in saying, hey, if you're going to promise something, either follow through with it or tell us, tell us beforehand so that we can follow through and make sure it's something that can actually happen. This is the language that we use for our double rate for STRTP. The youth indicated he de-escalates well, utilizing space and other coping mechanisms. An enhanced STRTP rate will be paid matching the STRTP rate during his placement. Further down, it will be paid directly from probation department funds to best placement. Probation may seek to recoup costs from the state block grant or other state funding, but this will be the responsibility of the county and not their problem. Because they were also leery, like, oh, is this really going to happen? Or are we just sticking our necks out for something that's not going to take place? And then we talk about the initial behavior contract that we can provide a immediate 14-day notice if he violates, followed by an emergency child and family team meeting. And if we're not able to preserve placement, then we'll remove him quickly. Oh, look at that, I have a bigger version of it. So that was the agreement that we had with the STRTP, Australia's best placement. And this is what we had to fill out for the child-specific funding that we sent. So it encompasses 3 slides. This first slide is mostly, general information, name, date of birth, jurisdiction, are they a regional center client, tribal, yes or no, what's the recommendation of the QI, assessment, do we have a recommendation from the CFT, is there a clinical recommendation by the IPC? You'll put that information here. I think when I sent it, it was probably 2, maybe 3 sentences that talked about how they supported our plan. The QI assessment, we put the date in, system of care if we had a TA call. If we didn't, check no. If you did, check yes. Do we have any other assessments? Do the assessments support the placement recommendation? Describe the exceptional needs identified in the assessments. So this is where you'll have a little bit more bulk of your information. I think I put maybe a paragraph of all the issues why. You can almost copy and paste why other STRTPs are rejecting it and put that information in because those are exceptional needs. But you use your best judgment on what to put there. And then here is our current 14-day notice. inability to identify placement due to recurring denials? If yes, what's the reasons? There again, copy and paste everything that they put. NDO's barriers to placement, and then ask them what their preferred placement is. During this process, we spoke with Joey and said, hey, you've been in here a while. There's one place that's willing to take a chance on you. You know the program because it's where you came from before when you were with probation. And we had a conversation, honest, open, upfront with him, said, if you go back there, there's going to be a behavior contract. If you go back, you're going to have to meet these certain criteria. Is that something you want to do? And he said, yeah, absolutely, because I don't want to be in the juvenile hall. Okay. So his preferred placement was to go back. That might not be everybody, but that was our case. Behavioral health. So do they get these services? Check yes if they do. They have medical needs, requested services that are needed but unavailable to support the child in the least restrictive setting. Yeah, you just go down and check yes or no. None of this stuff is rocket science. And I think that was kind of what I was identifying is, look, nothing's rocket science. It's really simple to fill out. What are the approximate estimated costs? So this will go through the end of the fiscal year. So if your service for this youth is wrapping around the fiscal year, you'll have to put that in maybe per quarter. Just do a little bit of math, you can figure that out. If you can't, Mr. Hale can help you. I think I put monthly, and then it was, I think I put a note down here in the narrative of the total cost. Yes, sir.
Oh, I just saw the question there about having to exhaust all other placements first prior, and I'm glad that Ty responded with no. If you think a more innovative idea will work. One other example, for other examples on this, we had one, I think, where they said, well, we can't meet their educational requirements, right? It was an IEP, and we can't meet it. Well, what if we pay for a teacher using these funds? Then will you be able to do it? They're like, well, what do you mean? Well, we'll just pay for a teacher. How much does a teacher cost? Well, we'll pay for a teacher. And that would still be cheaper than a lot of the other things that we might have to do to get this youth onto the path that they need to be successful in exiting the juvenile justice system. So I'm glad that Ty responded with that, and she's got other examples here in the chat. There's a lot of great information. But again, once you identify what it is that they need, then it's just a matter, like Kyle has said, of having those conversations with providers until you find one that says, well, with the additional funding in going toward whatever that is, almost anything can be done. So I think that creativity is really something that this money allows us as departments to do that maybe people aren't used to doing in the government, that they're used to, again, trying to make things fit into the existing pattern rather than coming up with these kind of creative solutions. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can't see the chat when I'm sharing my screen. Another thing that I'll piggyback off of that. Well, I'll finish this and I'll get to the question screen. So that's it. That's the whole submission process. You put your signatures here and your titles, and you send it off, and then they send it back with a little approved or denied on the bottom, and they'll send you a separate email saying you were approved for this amount of money. Congratulations. And at that point, I emailed my boss and my boss's boss, and I said, hey, we did it. And everyone's excited and happy, and you go and high five in the hallway. So that's the process. The only thing I have left is a slide for questions. I did want to mention that we did research doing an STRTP for one. I know that has been talked about a lot. For our scenarios, it wasn't, STRP for one takes a while to get started, and there's a lot of cost associated with it because everything is for that one youth. And when we looked at the different options, this was a much more cost-effective way that we thought would be successful versus an STRTP for one due to the time frame. and the cost. So weigh that within your own county. Every kid's going to be different. This worked so well with our kid named Joey, that we actually had a second youth that we did this also for, and it, like clockwork, we got the kid out, we got him started. Unfortunately, he was less successful overall, but not for lack of trying, and we gave him a good opportunity. So yeah, I thanks everyone for listening to our case study, and I'd love to answer any questions if they are there, or Mr. Riley, if you have anything else to add.
I would just add, so STRTP for one is, I think the question becomes, is that what is needed? Is that the thing that's going to work? In this case, we paid for both of the beds in a room, and that was enough. He had his own room. He didn't have to have the entire building to himself. So that's the difference. I think though the issue is, I hope we get more questions in the chat. Kyle, if you want to close out, your presentation, you can see the chat. So I think that's the question, is getting a good evaluation of what is needed, whether it's space or counseling or education or different kinds of therapies, and following that to the conclusion. So I think that some of these questions in here are coming up with allocations, and I think they're going to cover that between Ty and Hale.
And I do want to say that we do have John Hale from DSS. He works in the rate policy unit, so he will be helping answer questions that you may have. So I know, Kyle, you had asked if there was any questions, and I know you had just recently walked over the form. So I guess first thing is, are there any questions as it relates to the form, the walkthrough of the form? And if not, then we will open it up. As we had indicated before about this webinar, is that we were hoping that you would come with cases that you have in mind, or scenarios. So because we have the right folks at the table to go ahead and help the preliminary discussions to see if it's something that would be applicable using the child specific funds for your case. So we'll go ahead and open up now.
Hey, Stephanie, can I just add something?
Sure.
Kyle and Eric were very generous in saying that, we got their request turned around in, I think it was 7 days. But if you send us absolutely everything we need the first time, and believe it or not, the most often forgotten thing is to sign the darn thing. We have turned them around in the same day. We've just recently gone through our list to get average approval dates. We're right now at about 4 days, but that includes weekends. So, but looking at our list, 0 days, 0 days, 0 days, meaning we did it the same day. You can definitely get them faster. And if they're on, we call it Angie's list. If the list that Stephanie keeps sharing, if they're on there, those are usually the ones that get approved the quickest, because those are standard. But in terms of the samples, we've done equine therapy, we've done arts therapy, we've done STRP was the one, we've done single rooms like San Bernardino, we've done regional center placements, we've done additional funding to relatives to keep the child, or even additional funding, we put in a wheelchair ramp for a child that needed it. Additional travel for a child that has dialysis and has to go into LA every day for, treatment. So be creative, I guess is what I'm saying, because these funds really do have very few limitations, so long as it's to serve the complex care needs of a child or non-minor dependent.
And I think on that, exactly that note, Ty, Kyle, there's a question from Marina, who we've met before in that arena. And she has a kid with very severe mental health issues, and she's having a hard time finding them. So my question, Marina, for you would be, have you talked to, for example, Kyle or other people or other counties that have had success? Maybe they have a location that would be willing to take that youth, or that they know of some other resource. When you talk to the location, if they have very severe mental health issues, are you telling them, hey, they have very severe mental health issues, and we want to pay for the treatment that would be needed for that? So what does that look like? If they need a counselor to be there, if it takes 3 counselors each day and you pay for 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, and one in the evening, that's something like Ty is saying that the money can be spent on. So it really comes down to a conversation like Kyle was saying, I think, with the locations to say, what do you need from us to meet the needs of this youth? And then we can give you the funding for that, right, Kyle?
Yeah, so I'll give you a success and a not success story with severe mental health. I had one youth who we were actually looking at doing some complex care funding for. And there's a program that we use, Dean Associates works a lot with severe mental health kids. And so we were talking to them about, hey, you know, what would it, we just started the conversation. What would it take to get this kid in there? You know, and they said, well, let's have an interview with him. So what would it take? And we had that whole little conversation, but just the very, very beginning stages, they wanted to get an assessment of him first. And he was severe mental health. He was very large, and he would assault staff very often. And we had just started the conversation, and we never even got to, hey, what do you need extra money for? And they said, yeah, we'll take him. We're like, oh, okay. So that was a successful story that it just worked out. And then I had another youth who she had mental health issues. She was also assaulted towards staff. She jumped out of a tree one time and broke her neck. Like, there was a lot of problems with, I mean, her scaling was up here. Unfortunately, when we were having the conversations, many of the programs said, no, thank you, we're not really interested. And then she had a new charge, and it was actually SYTF eligible. And the judge felt, after she had done more issues in the juvenile hall and assaulted another kid pretty severely in juvenile hall, they said, we're done trying to find an STRTP. She's gonna have to do SYTF. So there's a success and a not success. And Marina, you can unmute. Yeah, we can talk it over.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, and I don't want to take too much of the time because my case may be very specific to us. But what we have is what you've just described as your not successful case. Is just multiply that by 10. So this young person that we currently have, he is 17-year-old male and severe mental health that with coexisting conditions. Psychosis. He's also autistic. He is presently in juvenile hall, and he is on 24-hour observation. He is, pooping on the plate and smearing it. He is assaulting staff, peers, and everything else. And with everything, the juvenile hall is doing an awesome job with supporting him as much as they can. And every effort, he is Kaiser covered in Medi-Cal, right? So every effort to have him brought for either assessment or just 5150s, right? Just some sort of a stabilization, because of course he is not med compliant. The PES does not want to keep him. They release him, and of course he goes to juvenile hall, right? So what we've reached out to numerous programs, and the minute we start, kind of a deeping, my assigned officer starts a deeper conversation about presenting issues. People just literally say thanks, but no thanks, because, and I've heard them say this. They're concerned for the liability. They're concerned that he's just not going to make it at all, right? The interesting part about this young person, though, he has had successful completion of one STRTP in Southern California that doesn't want to take him anymore, unfortunately, about a year and a half ago. But as we know, with young people with a continuous development, the brain change and there's other things. He is not the young person of a year and a half ago as he is today, right? And the other piece that we're struggling with is, unfortunately, the Public Defender's Office is not supporting, or has not supported, at least in the past, of asking the court to literally pay for someone to do a psychosocial assessment, maybe even some sort of a further clinical assessment, right? Because we don't know what's wrong, right? He is not engaging. So that's my question was the language to even, and I'm going to take back what you've said about what can we do to make this a non-rejection, right? Because I hear it, everything that's been said. I see the money, literally I see the money, but I don't have anybody to give it to, right? Because nobody would want to touch him because he has so many things going on at the same time that people just don't know what to do. So kind of that's my stance still. And happy Friday to all.
That's really rough. That's a tough one.
We have seen a lot of requests where, you know, that the laundry list of the problems that the child has, and you know, everything from 3-to-1 staffing, you know, we've seen, or bringing in you know, mental health, what are they called, the TFC, where the behavioral health will come in. You know, all of those things can be paid for. We are even in one case paying for a private therapist because the child had developed a relationship with that therapist, and now they won't take Medi-Cal or whatever it is. So we're, you know, we're paying for that. So I hear you that it's very difficult, but you know, like Kyle did, they were creative, and you know, John and I are here to help if you have questions about what you could, I hate to say offer them, but you know, what you could give them in terms of funding.
And Marina, sorry if you said this already. Have you set up a technical assistant call with the state on this?
I meant to ask
Yes.
that too.
Oh, yes, we have one next week on Friday.
Oh, perfect. It's this year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have not given up. I mean, you know, my team is awesome. So we're far from it, but yeah, it's a little challenging. And I'm, of course, being facetious here. It's very challenging, but we have not given up, and we'll find something. It's just, yeah, it does take time.
Yeah, and I would say that based on the technical assistant call, it does have various subject matter experts that will be on the line. So hopefully can come up with a strategy, a solution, and look at some options for the youth. And then that may help in reference to figure out what dollars to use for under the child specific funds.
Yeah, I would just Kyle Board, not the probation representative, but I would really push on the court as far as the psychosocial assessment, because I can see why the public defender would say, well, we don't want to know the extent of, you know, things wrong, maybe. I mean, I could see that point of view, but I would push that and say, we want to help little Johnny, and we don't know how to help little Johnny, and he's only decompensating. So this psychosocial assessment isn't to try to burn your client or to make anything difficult. This is trying to help. And when the judge can order, even if the public defender says no after they argue, that would just, I would, maybe you can discuss that in the TA call on maybe strategies to
Precisely, exactly, because we did
force their
ask.
hand,
Yeah,
for lack
exactly,
of
we
a better
did
term.
ask. Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you as a, you know, just not as a supervisor or placement unit, but just as a human being, right? I understand they don't want to put somebody in a box because that box stays with you forever. But at the same time, yeah, I don't know how to help him. I really don't, and he can't stay in juvenile hall. But all of these things are super helpful, and it kind of gives me even more hope for the Friday's call. Yeah.
And Stephanie, I don't see any other questions on the side. I see John Hale answered one question about the funding. Are the funds allocated directly to the county, or are they distributed directly to the parties? And that is our, John Hale answered it absolutely correct. They go to the county, but after you have already paid for the services, you're reimbursed. Oh, I do have one. It says, since funds are allocated, when does the fiscal year begin with child specific? And it's answered already. July 1, start of the fiscal year. We just started.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't approve them over fiscal years just because there is a chance that, you know, the money won't get allocated. So But, you know, you really can just update the one you sent in one fiscal year to us the next year. So you don't have to recreate a whole new thing. I also wanted to just talk about something Kyle said. Kyle said that they didn't want to do an STRTP of 1. The only thing about doing that is that you can then do an IMC rate, an innovative model of care, which is not John in my area, but it is within our bureau. And that can have federal funding in it. So if the child is federally eligible, it is something you should consider, because obviously we're all trying to stretch our budgets as far as we can. And the more federal money we can get, the better.
And I can drop that in the chat as well. In reference to IMC rate. Are there other cases? Oh, wait, there was a question.
Looks like Ivy has a question, and this would be for Ty probably. If we've already spent our county's allocation for the fiscal year, can we submit additional funding requests?
So I sort of alluded to this in my talk. We, this year we did something different. We only gave you half your allocation in July. You may or may not have noticed that. And we're working on doing it differently come January, because, you know, right now the most we've spent is 12 million, I think, John, like 12 or 13 million. So we're not getting these funds spent. So what we have proposed, and you know, we did meet with CPOC and talk with them about it, and CWDA. We have not made any final decisions yet, but what we're looking at is, if you spend your half of the year funds, then you'll get the full amount in January as well. So say you got 30,000 in July, then you'd get another 30,000 in January. And if you didn't spend your funds, then you may not get anything in January, but we would put it into a pot of money. And there's some discussion about who would be in charge of that pot of money, but we would put it in a pot of money that any county could then request funds out of. So that those of you who have overspent, that we could, you know, reallocate it to you. We did do that last year. Some of the probation departments gave us back $2 million, and we reallocated that to other counties. So, you know, we are working and looking at ways to get it all spent. So I would suggest you send an email to John and ask him what works best for him. He can check how much money you have left in terms of your specific situation, Ivy. But you should be looking for a new CFL in the next month or two that will discuss what we're going to do in January for the second half.
Looks like
Real quick, first of all, I want to say Andrea has their hand up. But I wanted to add, I saw it went by in the chat earlier, so I wanted to remind people. Ty is trying to say here, you should spend this money. Remember, it covers RFA as well, which is also required for those of us who may not have been doing a whole lot with RFA. This money can go to help with that as well, for those youth as well. I just wanted to point that out. But Andrea, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys for this training. This is very helpful and insightful. And I'm glad Ivy mentioned about the allocation, because I did notice that it did significantly be cut by half. And what I was concerned about is, I know you guys said creative ways to use this money. And I think we might, before I even offer this up to the STRTP, because we have a kid currently who's hard to place and has been in the hall for a while. And we were waiting for the bed to open. They said, yes, we'll take her. And then she has a lot of mental health issues. So we were excited to wait for that day to come. And then as it got closer, they said, never mind, we can no longer take her due to her mental health issues that I guess have even more transpired while in the hall, or saying we don't have staffing now, which was interesting. So before offering the, paying for a staff, because I know you mentioned something like paying for a teacher, like I want to be able to make sure we have these funds that we can continue to get based on that acceptance. So
So again, if you spent your money the first half of the year, you're going to get that amount again. There's no question about that. It's what we're going to do with the people that maybe only spent part of their money or a little bit of their money or didn't spend it all. So yeah, you're virtually guaranteed to get that second half of the money in January if you spend the first half. And as I said, we're not trying to penalize anyone. We're just trying to make sure the funds get spent because we don't want them to go back and be spent on DMV or something else.
Okay, and then is there any kind of list, helpful list that you guys can send with, what is covered? I know that we're gonna still be creative, but is there any kind of just general?
Stephanie's posted it several times.
Oh, okay, sorry. Must
No,
have
it's
missed.
okay.
Well,
Thank
Yeah,
you.
scroll up and it should be there.
And actually, on that note, Andrea, actually, I was going to point out that I think what I've experienced is that we've come up with some great ideas. Other people have come up with some great ideas. I see Samantha Klein's on this call. She's a brilliant fiscal person out of Marin County probation, for example. And so there's a wealth of resources just in this webinar right here, these 96 participants, 100 participants. Kimberly Epps, who's going over to Los Angeles County probation. So there's all these resources here. And maybe sometimes what's not happening is maybe we're not communicating with the other counties in a manner, like Ty's nodding her head, where we're like, hey, we came up with that and we have an idea about that. So I think that maybe part of this is maybe, I don't know how Stephanie or Mackenzie would make it into a group or a group email or something. Hey, I have this particular issue. Like when Marina talks about the serious mental health issues. And Kyle might say, oh, I have a place. They've said, if you'll give us enough money, we'll hire 3 full-time psychiatrists, if that's what it takes. I know of that place. So maybe that's the part that's missing here is amongst all of our counties in California, we're just not realizing that other people have had this problem and have found something in some other county to be a resource.
Well, and I also think that when there's inquiries that come about a certain case, DSS, with them collecting the reimbursement of the child-specific request forms, they may be familiar with some of the things that other counties are doing too, as brainstorming some options. So that would be helpful.
And absolutely, we will do that. But you have to remember, we already have 600 requests, so we can't remember the details of all of them.
I'm gonna put my email address in the chat. If anybody has an issue they don't want to talk about in front of the whole group or just a thought process, I am by no means a genius, but I would love to try to help when I can. Even if sometimes just talking it through with somebody else, just having someone as a sounding board and me just listening, saying, oh, okay, then you kind of talk your own answer out. So if anyone wants to chat about something, you can always hit me up and we can connect. And if I don't know the answer, I'll be like, hey, Rayleigh, will you come here real quick? And he thinks outside the box. So that'll be the answer.
And since you mentioned that, Kyle, just point out that Kyle's on call right now. So weekends, evenings, don't let that limit you.
Yeah, I was up at 4:15 this morning to respond to something. So
You're talking about a support group. I don't know if this would work for you, but the child welfare, the eligibility workers, they all have literally an email group where if you have a question, you just send it to the entire group and then you get, 50 answers. But one of those 50 answers may help. So it's something you could think about. And they, of course, include us on it so we can answer.
Sorry, I had it on mute. I was gonna say, this is one last call. I mean, I know many of you guys have questions and it's come up before, even at our PAC meeting, but just wanted to, you guys have a question, this is the last time before we close.
Hi, I have a question.
Go ahead, Paul, thanks.
So we do have one really hard to place youth here in Fresno County. And I was just wondering if I could drop my email in the chat, if anybody could possibly provide, I heard a couple great things, like if it takes 3 counselors a day, what do you guys need? We're just kind of looking for any and all solutions, maybe something that we haven't thought of yet. But this one youth, we're out of Fresno. We placed him in San Diego, and we've been doing weekly trips down there. So that's 6 hours both ways. And unfortunately, they did issue a 14-day, but we've kind of, it's almost like we tried everything except the increased funding. And I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I'm kind of just looking for different solutions, or maybe some of the other people in this meeting who have come across that challenge, and maybe to hear some solutions that they tried. I would really appreciate it. So if I can just leave my email in the chat, that would be great.
Thanks, Paul. We could touch base. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we will go ahead and conclude. We want to thank our speakers today for presenting, and also want to thank our attendees for joining us. Hopefully you found this workshop very helpful, and you're able to take these resources back to your county to further enhance those services and fill the gaps for youth with complex needs. We will be sending materials once again, post this webinar, and have a great day. And once again, thank you for joining us.